We have another absolutely heartbreaking story of the consequences of living in a post-Roe v. Wade America. We're going to talk about Amber Nicole Thurman, a 28-year-old mother who died after Georgia doctors delayed a routine abortion-related procedure after she was forced to travel out of state for an abortion. And I want to bring up this picture, because this is Amber with her son. We're going to move on to what happened to her and what, because of our politicians, led to her death. But before we do that, I want you to know who she was. And there she was not too long ago with her son. She was a single parent who apparently loved being a mother. Every chance she got, they say, she took her son to petting zoos, to pop-up museums, and on planned trips like one to a Florida beach. You see her at a beach right there. She said, quote, "The talks I have with my son are everything." She posted that on social media, and I apologize, but I am already having difficulty with this. She was a 28-year-old mom who loved her kid and wanted to raise her kid, and ideally wanted to do that in a civilized country, a country where we prioritize the lives of people. We care about them, we protect them, and we legislate to make sure that that happens. And unfortunately, we didn't do that. The Republicans engaged in a half-century-long effort to convince people that abortion is evil, and they weren't able to do that. So they just killed it through the Supreme Court. And all along the way, before, during, and after that happening, we said this is going to lead to uncountable, unmeasurable human suffering and tragedy, and people will die, and people are dying. Amber is not the only, she will not be the last, but she is one. And so here's what happened to her. Thurman had decided to get an abortion after learning she was pregnant with twins. She already had one child, remember. But the very day she passed the 6-week mark of her pregnancy, Georgia implemented a ban forbidding abortion after 6 weeks gestation. So 6 weeks being the most extreme sort of ban that most of these states have. It was a horrific coincidence that it happened to be the same day. So Thurman traveled 4 hours to an abortion clinic in North Carolina, where abortions were then allowed past 20 weeks. Again, even that is more extreme than it used to be, but there she was given 2 of the most common drugs used to do the pharmaceutical abortion. A few days after she took the pills, her pain became excruciating and she was bleeding through a pad every hour. Complications from abortion pills are rare. They've been around and available and safe here in the United States and in most countries for many years, but they do sometimes happen. And sometimes you have to have what's called a D&C to remove remaining fetal tissue from the fetus that could lead to life-threatening sepsis, sort of a follow-up to the pharmaceutical abortion. The North Carolina clinic would have performed the D&C for free if Thurman lived closer. Instead, after vomiting blood and passing out at home, Thurman was brought to the hospital in the Atlanta suburbs. So instead of being there, she was instead in Georgia. So the issue is that in this case, the abortion had already happened. It happened through the use of those medicines. The D&C was to help make sure that following the abortion, she did not develop sepsis and potentially die. The issue is that D&C can also be used to do an abortion, a non-pharmaceutical abortion. And because of that, many physicians living in states that have these draconian bans are terrified of doing it because they don't want to end up in jail for the rest of their life. And so often they will wait because they're terrified. And that's what actually happened. They can be super slow to use them, not only in follow-ups to the pharmaceutical abortions, but to miscarriages and other emergency situations as well. And so that happened, and not until 2 p.m. the day after she entered the hospital was she brought for surgery. They waited that long. She died in the operating room. The Georgia Maternal Mortality Review Committee found that if a D&C had been performed earlier, there was a, quote, good chance her death could have been prevented. And we will never know. Maybe she would have died. Maybe she was always slated to die. Maybe if the surgery had happened faster, she wouldn't have died. Maybe if some of the other insane hoops that she had to jump through to have control over her body the way she had for like 26 of the 28 years she'd lived in this country, she wouldn't have died. And for many people, like I can't even imagine what her family is going through. Her son has just lost his mom totally needlessly because of choices that were made by religious zealots who decided that they get to say what happens to you and your body. They're not satisfied to make decisions for themselves. That gets boring after a while, especially because the vast majority of these are men and they hunger for control over women. They want to decide what you get to do. And there are consequences to that. There are literally life and death consequences to that. Now, Kamala Harris has put out a statement in response to this saying, a young mother from Georgia should be alive today, raising her son and pursuing her dream of attending nursing school. This is exactly what we feared when Roe v. Wade was struck down. In more than 20 states, Trump abortion bans prevent doctors from providing basic medical care. Women are bleeding out in parking lots, turned away from emergency rooms, losing their ability to ever have children again. Survivors of rape and incest are being told they cannot make decisions about what happens next to their bodies. And now women are dying. These are the consequences of Donald Trump's actions. And in response, Donald Trump and the Republicans have said nothing. They don't care and they're not going to talk about it. That's it. Doesn't matter. You can add this to the list of women, not all of whom died. Some have just been scarred for life, seriously injured, gone through horrific situations. And those are scattered all across our country. And every week, every day, there's another. It's another 12-year-old, being forced to raise a child. We'll turn to that in just a sec. It's all over the place. And it is the not only predictable consequences of what they did, they're the predicted consequences of what they did. They knew when they did it that blood would be on their hands, but they decided, I don't care. I like it. I like controlling what these women who I don't even know, I've never been within 2,000 miles of them, but I like controlling what they do. And even if I'm not that personally fired up about this, Donald Trump doesn't really seem to care about the religious stuff. I don't think he's an actual Christian or anything. It's helpful. It's helpful politically. I don't know, I can lock down a few more votes or whatever. Maybe it helps me win an election. And hell, if a 28-year-old single mom needs to die, I gotta get back into office. That's what they're actually thinking. That's what they've done to our country. Thanks for watching our video. Did you know that you can support our show by becoming a subscriber? Just click the subscribe button and also ring the bell so that you get notifications when we're live or when we post new content.